Oh, hey.
Hey, calling Chris Anderson in Windsor.
I am in Windsor, yes, W1. And Rick, you look like you were in Studio C1.
Studio C1 in Chicago.
Yes.
C1 to W1. I should learn the Morse code for that. Yeah, that would be awesome. And look, you can see both of our microphones. This is very exciting to me. So that you now have room in your spacious new studio to be able to get your microphone up near your mouth.
I know.
Which is where a microphone belongs.
Should be, yeah.
It should be. Welcome, everybody, to History Happy Hour. Thanks to Stephen Ambrose Historical Tours for helping to bring you this show. And you can check out their rich offering of military history tours at stephenambrosetours.com. And whether you're watching live, whether you're watching on replay, maybe you're not watching at all, you're listening on the HHH
podcast.
Yes, we're glad you're here. And today we have an encore episode about the Normandy battle at Villers Bocage featuring arch-villain Michael Wittmann.
Yes.
Yeah, so let us know you're out here and what you're drinking. This is an encore episode, so we're not really here.
No.
Where are you now? Where have you just been this week?
I've been in Sofia, Bulgaria.
Wow.
So, yeah, and you?
I am Chicago as we're talking here, but St. Louis during the show on Sunday.
Oh, very good.
I think that Sofia does beat St. Louis as a destination.
Yeah, I certainly hope so. I certainly hope so.
I've never been to Sofia.
Neither have I.
Have you been to St. Louis?
I have, in fact, been to St. Louis.
Okay, so you can compare them when you're...
I'll report in after.
Would you do a report, St. Louis versus Sofia? No, first of all, no arch, I'm guessing.
I'm guessing not, yeah. But maybe a castle or two or something.
Oh, not too many castles in St. Louis, so that's an issue.
Yeah.
Hey, guys, since you're out there, let us know you're here. Say hello. And let us know what you're drinking because, we want you to be drinking. I think it's the only way.
We're certainly going to be drinking, yes.
We're probably drinking at the moment. And I also want to take a moment to thank everybody who supports us via Patreon and especially, can I push the button? Especially our top shelf supporters.
Hey.
Thank you, guys. Our top shelf patrons.
We really appreciate it.
We really do. We say it every week, but we really, really appreciate it. And, you guys keep the history tabs open. Thank you. And you can join this august group by clicking on patreon.com/historyhappyhour. All righty, Chris, we've believe it or not, we've already killed almost 3 minutes.
Oh, yeah.
And what have we said? I mean, what is
not very much is often the case.
Yeah. All right. So why don't we, you give me a start here. And why don't we get going?
Bar is open.
The bar is open. And Chris, one of the most famous, perhaps controversial small unit actions that the British fought in Normandy is the Battle of Villers Bocage, as the British were trying to extend their line and get around Caen. And this is a battle known to many people, largely for the exploits of one man, a German Panzer ace, Michael Wittmann. But there is a lot more to it than that. And joining us today to discuss this battle is Daniel Taylor, who is the author of the book Villers Bocage, Operation Perch, The Complete Account. And Daniel Taylor is the curator of the Kenton Sharpshooters Yeomanry Museum, and the sharpshooters being the primary British unit involved in the Battle of Villers Bocage. So Dan Taylor, welcome to History Happy Hour.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm glad to be on.
I'm glad that you're glad. And did you bring a cocktail to this event today?
Of course I did. I have a Pimm's.
Oh, very nice.
Excellent. Well done. You, Mr. Anderson?
I'm a Glen Turret 12.
All right. Well, I've got an anti-hero. So
an anti-hero what?
An anti-hero IPA.
Thank you.
Okay. Dan, I suspect the Battle of Villers Bocage is better known in Britain than in the U.S. So perhaps, since we have a largely American audience, we could maybe start with some context. This starts on June 13th. So what's the situation in Normandy on June 13th? What are the British trying to do, and who is involved in moving on Villers Bocage?
Very fair question. we're a week after D-Day, and the British have been trying to capture Caen since D-Day. It was meant to be a D-Day objective. Whether that was a star to shoot at or an actual objective is a moot point. But the 3rd Infantry Division had tried to attack Caen on D-Day, and the Germans had put 21st Panzer Division in the way. The Canadians had then tried, 3rd Canadian Division had tried to come around a little bit from the west, and the first reinforcements to turn up, 12th SS Panzer Division, was thrown in the way. And then 30 Corps was advancing south through Bayeux towards Tilly-sur-Seulles, and the next set of German reinforcements to turn up, Panzer, another elite Panzer Division, was pitched up and arrived in the way. So each time they had tried to find a way around the German front before it congealed once they had enough reinforcements, but they kept attracting the German Panzer divisions, which on one level is quite good for us because it means that we've got the elite of the Wehrmacht and the Waffen SS being thrown into the line. They're meant to be an attack force, but if they're being defensive, then they can't use their power to push us out. The trouble is that there's a limited amount of time before the line does congeal, and so they're constantly looking for a way to get around. And the Americans, having had a bit of a traumatic time on Omaha Beach against 352nd Infantry Division on the German side, they had enough troops ashore. They had the whole 5th Corps ashore by then, pushing this single division backwards, and they started to collapse around Caumont, which is right at the eastern side of the American sector. Thank you for putting the map up. This meant that there was a gap in the line. Now, the Americans couldn't really exploit it without coming across the British side, and the British couldn't really exploit it without going through the American side. So a plan was evolved where they were going to pluck out 7th Armored Division, our best tank division, our most experienced tank division, and we're going to push it around the line and try to get to Villers Bocage. And that's the situation they were on 12th of June, 1944 at about 4 o'clock in the afternoon.
Okay. So Dan, I mean, just you could, without getting to too much table of organization stuff, talk a little bit about, some of the units that are going to be fighting one another. I know the 7th, as you say, is one of the best, but they're certainly famous, and you talk about them and some of the Germans they're going to be opposing. So we know who's facing who. Here.
Okay, well, the immediate problem for them was Panzer. They are an elite training division. They're very strongly armed with Panthers and Panzer IVs, and they're forming the front line around which we're trying to get. 7th Armored Division is part of 30 Corps, and they are trying to push south, and then this gap opens. And they are composed of 2 brigades. You have an armoured brigade and an infantry brigade in a British armoured division. 22nd Armoured Brigade is composed of 3 armoured regiments and a motorised infantry battalion. Now, I've used the term regiment. I'm aware that in America the term is used slightly differently. We would regard what you think of as a regiment as a brigade. We think of regiment on all sorts of levels. So our cap badges are our regimental badge. So you have an affiliation usually to somewhere geographic or to a particular unit. We've also got the concept of regiments are where battalion is an infantry phrase. You've got regiment is the cavalry phrase, and in this case we've got 3 armoured units. We've got the 1st Royal Tank Regiment, 5th Royal Tank Regiment, and the one I'm mainly concerned with, which is the 4th County of London Yeomanry, the sharpshooters. They're a yeomanry unit, which means that they are part-time. They're our territorial army, like the National Guard.
Yep.
And but this division is very experienced. The sharpshooters were first employed in the desert in 1941 in Operation Crusader. They fought through the Gazala line, El Alamein, which are all our major battles. They took part in the advance through North Africa, into Tunisia, and then into southern Italy at the end of 1943, and were pulled back. The whole division was pulled back from Italy in order to take part in the invasion, because Montgomery wanted his best troops at the front. So you've got 3 armoured regiments, battalions, if you like, in the 22nd Armoured Brigade, and you've got a motorised infantry, which is the 1st Battalion of the Rifle Brigade, which is where I actually trace my antecedents from. I'm an infantryman originally with the Royal Green Jackets, and I've been sort of adopted by.
They let you in?
They did, very kindly. The other bit of 7th Armoured Division is 131st Infantry Division, which is made up of 3 battalions of the Queen's Regiment. They're Laureate Infantry, and the usual practice is to mix and match which units you want. So 22nd Armoured Brigade was pulled out of the line in order to take advantage of the gap in the German line. They took with them in the lead 4th County London Yeomanry, 1st Battalion of the Rifle Brigade, 1st 7th Queens, which is one of the 3 Queen's regiments, and there's also all sorts of other regiments. So you've got there's an anti-tank regiment in self-propelled M10 Achilles, which is our 17-pounder armed version. You've got 5th Royal Horse Artillery. So the units that would be useful and can be easily extracted from the line are being thrown into this push around the edge. The trouble is they've only got one road to go along, and trying to organise a traffic jam through German lines is turning into a little bit of a drama. By early evening, around 8 o'clock, they get to a little village called Livry. And
this is on the 12th, right?
Still on the 12th.
Yeah, right.
They get to this little village of Livry, and the lead troops as a reconnaissance unit that's part of 7th Armoured Division, which is the 8th King's Royal Irish Hussars. They are in Cromwell tanks, which is our latest vehicle. The sharpshooters are also armed with that, but they've also got the 17-pounder armed Sherman Firefly tanks, 1 per troop, a troop being 4 tanks in total. So 3 of them are Cromwell's, 1 of them is a Firefly, and that's quite important in the story.
Sherman Firefly has a bigger gun put on it, right? So that it can actually face a German.
It can penetrate
and,
the best of the German tanks at decent battlefield range. Most of the tanks we've got are Cromwell's. They've got 75mm armed guns, exactly the same ammunition as the Sherman with a 75mm, and so they will struggle to get through the heavier German tanks. But things like the Panzer IV that they're more likely to meet is entirely penetrable, and so they can fight it on even terms. Panthers, you've kind of got to get around the edge. Tigers are a little bit of a problem, which may come into the story shortly.
Yes. Well, I was going to say, let's move into that. I mean, you talk at the beginning of the book. You say you call it the bones of the story. There's a sort of famous or well accepted narrative of what happens. So why don't we briefly tell people what they think they know about this battle, and then we'll talk about what you've find out.
This is the story as handed down. The idea is that on the morning of 13th of June, a group of German Tiger tanks had spent time getting to the front. They had pitched up and parked themselves up, thinking they were well behind their own lines, so they're going to have time to recuperate, to let most of the unit turn up, because there's only a few of them there. And lo and behold, a British armoured column suddenly starts advancing across their front. They call out the commander of the unit, a chap called Michael Wittmann. He's a lieutenant. There we are. Within the German unit, he's in command of 2nd Company of Schwer SS Panzer Abteilung 101. He has a famous gunner with him, Balthasar Woll, who he's run up enormous totals on the Russian front with. And Woll says to Wittmann, they're acting as if they've won the war already. To which Wittmann is meant to have replied, well, let's prove them wrong. And he drives into the British column. It's trapped in a narrow lane. He knocks out the leading tank. He knocks out the tail end tank, and then he goes along the column, wiping them all out. Destroys a regiment of British tanks and a battalion of infantry, and then comes back in the afternoon and takes part in further bits of battle. And it's a wonderful story, but it is entirely German propaganda. That, fortunately, as it was a good story, historians in the 70s and 80s, once Montgomery was no longer there to defend himself, we used Villers Bocage as a stick to beat his reputation with. The idea being that the best of the British tanks were, tank units were not that great, and they stuffed up and they got themselves into this stupid position. And I fully believed this story initially. And I went to Villers Bocage once, and I was standing on this road they were meant to be trapped in. It's a big highway. It's the main road between Brittany and Caen.
And this is a map of Villers Bocage, which is where Michael Wittmann would have come from the upper right down into the center of town, battling the Brits along the way.
That's the story as it's handed down to us. He's slightly off of this map in a little it's called the Ancienne Route de Caen, which is a tiny little lane. It's 250 yards south of the main highway, which is the road that's running off the top right hand corner of the picture. And the principle is that he's come across the fields and he's destroyed the column. There are other problems that start to come up with the story. For example, Bobby Vole actually wasn't there. He'd been given his own tank by now, and it had broken down somewhere back. And all of a sudden, all these things that you knew about the story sort of crumbled, and I wanted to find out more. And I started digging. It was impugning the reputation of my regiment, the Green Jackets, and I got in touch with the sharpshooters because they were being denigrated. And in particular, there was an author who wrote about Michael Wittmann in about 1991, and it was so flagrantly anti-British that I wrote a very strong letter to the publisher. The trouble is the letter got to 10,000 words, and I thought, they're not going to read it. And so I went to a British publisher and said, what can I do with this? Because it's burning in me. I want to try and explain why the story that's been handing down is wrong. Because fortunately, the Germans turned up the next day. They took 100 propaganda photographs around the town that kind of disprove a lot of the things that are being said. A lot of the tanks and where they're knocked out, they couldn't possibly have been touched by Michael Wittmann in his charge. There's this story of the British being nose to tail. It's entirely based on, I think you have a photograph of the motorized infantry parked by the side of the road. They had been asked to pull off the side of the road so that the main infantry could turn up. And excuse me. They could turn up and come and reinforce the top of the hill on which was to the east of the town, whilst the motorized infantry were pulled back into reserve, and so they could then defend this area, which has good views towards Caen, excellent views to the south. It's a really useful hill right in the middle of the advance. It dominates Panzerlehr's rear, and so had the British been able to grab it and hold it, then it's a very attractive target. Villers Bocage has 5 major roads going into it, so a real hub. It's a great place to have. It's just happenstance that Michael Wittmann, when he turned up, he's only got 5 tanks with him at this moment. He happens to come out of cover right in the weakest point of the line. The lead squadron, the lead company, if you like, of tanks had gone past. You've got the motorized infantry behind who've parked on the road. You've got the rest of the column that's further back into the town and back towards Livery, where they had been stopped the previous night. And he happens to strike at a point where we can do it. The first 2 tanks on the British side that are taken out are Sherman Fireflies, the one tank that can do something about a Tiger tank. The Tiger, just to be clear, it's a 56-ton monster that's got 4 inches of frontal armor, an 88mm gun. It's got all these lovely statistics that one of the things that makes the battle fascinating. You've got the British with their 30-ton tanks, the Sherman and the Cromwell. The Cromwell armed with a 75mm gun, which is only just about adequate, can do nothing about this. I don't know whether you want to me to launch into the start of the what really happened.
Well, I do, but what I wanted to say is that you write in your book that in subsequent years this story has been misrepresented, misinterpreted, and manipulated in order to provide narrative to agenda-based histories, which rarely, if ever, bothered examining the facts. So let's look at the facts. And I mean, it seems to me, I don't want to give away the answer, having read your book, that, okay, Michael Wittmann maybe didn't do everything that the legend says, but he still had a hell of a 10 minutes there on High Street in Villers Bocage and put a blunt stop to this British advance with what he did do.
You're exactly right. And one of the things I try to stress strongly is that I'm not trying to knock Michael Wittmann. I don't make any claims of what he did.
We don't mind knocking.
Yeah.
That's a okay.
What I'm knocking is the if you like, lazy historian who looks at the German propaganda story, says, "Wow, that fits my agenda. That's what I want to tell, and it's really exciting. And it's got the SS and it's got the Tiger tank and it's got all these things that make for a gripping story." And I'm not going to really scratch at the surface, because if I know what really happens, then it might not fit what I'm trying to say quite as well. Max Hastings, for example, wrote about this in his Overlord book, and there's many fine things about what Max has written, but if you're basing your criticism of the British Army and Montgomery's generalship and all the other and the laziness of the officers and all the other the little myths that have been brought up in order to make journalism out of it, if you like, it doesn't work if you know what really happened. Would you like me to?
Yes. So what really happened?
What happened?
So we've got these 5 German Tiger tanks. They're parked in a little lane to the south of the main highway. The British have arrived at Villers Bocage, having set off from Livry, which is about 5 kilometres away, at 5 o'clock in the morning. They didn't reach Villers Bocage until about 8:30. The lead element of the column has moved through the town and has arrived up at point 213. And
Can
it's only
you just tell us where point 213 is on this map?
There was another map I provided that's looks a little bit like that's the one. So if you look in the upper right hand corner, there is a bunch of circles just underneath your logo, which is point 213. So that's about a mile outside town.
Okay.
The column of British tanks is in standard convoy mode. So each tank is 100 yards apart, and so they're strung out all the way down this road, with the lead troop having reached there. The motorised infantry is behind. They're near the junction with the road that heads north towards Villers Bocage, which you can see near the centre at the top. And crucially, the regimental headquarters, who think they're protected because they've got an entire squadron of tanks ahead of them, have arrived at the top end of town, and they've stopped to have a conflab with Brigadier Hind, who's in charge of this operation. Behind them, the high street is almost clear, apart from a couple of OP tanks from our Royal Artillery. So observation post tanks. There's a square almost bang smack in the middle of that picture called the Place Richard Lenoir, where there are 2 OP. There's an OP Sherman, which doesn't have a gun. It's got a wooden dummy gun.
I'm sorry. I read this in the book, and I confess to not knowing what an OP Sherman is, and why does it have a dummy wooden gun, which would seem to
got lots of equipment in the turret, Rick.
Not make it very effective.
It is the battery commander's tank, and his job is to direct what's going on, not to fight battles with all those common folk. He's got an OP Cromwell with him, which is a regular Cromwell tank, but it's really set up for.
And what does the OP stand for?
Sorry?
What is the OP stand? I'm sorry to go off on
post. I'm sorry.
Observation post. Okay.
Yes.
Very good. Keep going.
Right. So this is where the column is at the moment of the attack. And Wittmann comes out of cover initially, and he's picked the wrong tank to go in. The tank is misfiring, and the gunner's been trying to tell him, "Look, boss, we shouldn't be going forward in this. It's going to break down." And so Wittmann jumps out of the first tank, which is out of cover, jumps into a second tank, and tells the rest of the unit, "Stay here, try to cover the column that's on top of the hill. I'm going to see what I can do about stopping the advance. He goes across the field in this tank, probably taking out the rearmost Sherman Firefly. The Firefly would be at the back of each troop. That gets hit. The Cromwells start to scuttle away. They disappear into the field opposite because they cannot take on a Tiger effectively. And this is a group of them. They're in an orchard halfway up the hill. So you've now got two bits of A squadron. You've got the bits that haven't been knocked out in the middle of the road have pulled into an orchard to the north of the road. You've got the rest of it up on point 213, which has a little bit of cover. The hedgerows there are a bit more thick, and they can get into some cover. And the Germans have been shooting at them. Another Firefly is taken out before it's able to get away. So two of the tanks that could do something about the Germans out of the four that were with the leading squadron are now incapacitated, and so can't do anything about it. Wittmann reaches the main road and turns onto it. He runs straight into the rifle brigade. They're in half tracks and carriers and can offer no resistance. Most of the guys there are replacements. They've come in since the battalion came back from Italy, and so this is their first action, and they scarper. There's a couple of guys try to get Perch, and there's a chap called Dougie Watt who was one of the few experienced guys there. He was a corporal with the Rifle Brigade. He dashed back to his half track, grabbed a Perch, was just about to come out when the half track was hit. He was blown into the bushes and woke up 3 hours later. And so there's smoke and fire and confusion going on, and immediately behind them you've got two reconnaissance tanks, the Stuart light tanks. They've got 37mm guns, and there is a Tiger coming down the road at them. The lead one has a young lieutenant, second lieutenant called Rex Ingram. He is unable to do anything about shooting the tank, so he tries to put his tank across the road to stop it getting down into the rest of the column. His tank is hit, it explodes. He manages to get out, but in going back to try and rescue his driver, he gets machine gunned down, unfortunately. The Stuart behind that is commanded by a chap called Ferdy Ferguson. Ferdy Francis. He is a very experienced sergeant, been in the desert. He knows there's nothing they can do, so he abandons the tank. And this leaves exposed behind them the 4 tanks of the regimental headquarters. These are all Cromwell tanks. The lead one, having seen there's something going on ahead, thinks there's something off to the right, and so is pulled into a paddock just out of town. And just then the Tiger comes through the smoke. He turns, and there's a lovely account of the gunner firing at this Tiger, the shot bouncing off the side of it. Still 80mm of armor on the side of the damn thing. He fires another shot, bangs off. The Tiger stops, fires at him. The tank is hit, and they try to bail out. There's a couple of them stuck inside, and Ferdy Francis comes back and rescues 2 of the people. So him abandoning his tank was actually quite useful. Behind the lead tank in the RHQ is a chap called John Thompson. He was a very good friend of his. He died in 2013, but he vividly described how this Tiger tank came out of the smoke down the road. He had presumed that the fire was coming from the right. He had been trying to back into a little garden by the side of the road so that he could try and get round behind the German position. Then saw the Tiger come through the smoke. He realised that the travel lock was on his gun, so he reached across and he's trying to undo that. That's not going to work, so he reaches across and fires the 2-inch smoke mortar, which sails straight over the top of the Tiger. At which point the Tiger stops and fires at him. And he vividly describes the sensation of an 88mm round going between his legs. I'm not sure it can be true. It can be true because all of the crew survived, but I'm sure you could believe it when you're in a tank that's just been hit by a Tiger. Behind that, you've got the tank of Pat Dart, and he has the first bit of luck in that he was going back to conform with John Thompson. He pulled into a farmyard off the side of the road, and the Tiger was just about to go straight past him, and he would have been able to fire at the side of the Tiger at point blank range, but for the fact that his gunner had just got out for a pee before the action started. And so opportunity lost, perhaps. Behind that was the 4th RHQ tank, which was the regimental sergeant major. He got stuck on some logs that were by the side of the road, and his tank was taken out. And so Tiger's now gone through the RHQ, and he's turning onto the main drag of the high street, and comes across the first tank he will have seen is the observation post Sherman without a gun. Now, the crew had got out, apart from the driver, a chap called Jock Ray, who I was very fortunate to meet. He had got it back into the tank in order to get some cigarettes out and try and organise his kit, and had just put his head out, and the Tiger came around the corner at him. And he did what he's trained to do. He put his headphones on and said, "Enemy tank to front, sir." And then remembered there's no one in the tank. And there's nowhere he can go, because if he gets out, he's going to get machine gunned. And if he stays there, he's going to get shot. And so he thinks his number is up. The Tiger stops and fires at the same time. So it pitches forward as it fires. And he's very fortunate in that the shell hits the road straight in front of the tank. Jock still can't do anything to get out of there. The Tiger reloads, fires a shot, fortunately hits the turret, is in the hull, and he's the only person I know who has successfully escaped from a Sherman tank whilst it's burning through the escape hatch in the bottom. So a little bit of fortune there. The Tiger advances further down the road. Immediately behind the OP Sherman was the OP Cromwell. That's backed around the corner, but in so doing, it has trapped a curbstone off the sidewalk in his track, and is stuck directly across the side road. They're wondering what on earth they can do. It decides to abandon the tank because there's nothing. The driver gets out so quickly, he goes straight through the plate glass window of the shop opposite, and so manages to get out. And they're cowering around the corner as the Tiger goes along the main street, looks like it's going to pass, then it stops, turns its turret, and fires, dispatching the Cromwell. Now, at that point, the British have their first bit of luck, because for some reason the smoke clears. The troops that have been fleeing the German onslaught, in particular a chap called Charlie Pierce and the brigade commander who had seen what was going on, had been warning the troops further down the street, and a single Sherman Firefly had advanced to the bottom of the high street. It's a long high street. It's 800 yards long, up a hill, and as the German has fired along the side street, which is the one that leads north from the Place Richard Lenoir, the smoke clears enough for him to get a sight of it. He fires. Probably doesn't hit. There's all sorts of smoke and clag when a Firefly fires. There's tiles coming off the roof. There's glass coming in. There's dust being thrown up. And so he might have got a hit. He might not. They fire again. There's a bit of a flash. It might have been a hit. But by then, the Tiger's turned around and it's starting to point back towards them. The Tiger fires. They fire. There's bits of... you can't see anything. There's bits of building falling down on the Sherman. And the Tiger, at this point, decides to bug out, in my version of the story. Now, Pat Dias, back above the corner, has got his co-driver into the gunner's seat and has pulled out onto the top of the high street above the corner, and has pulled down to the corner in order to see if he can get at the German from behind. The smoke clears a little bit, and not only is there a Tiger there, it turns out it's coming towards him. He manages to get two shots off at the front of the Tiger. You must bear in mind that he's already seen a lot of his troop fail to penetrate this thing. He's still willing to have a go. After two shots, the German returns fire, hits the hull of the tank. Pat's blown out, and so lands by the side of the road, and the Tiger passes him. Now, there's all manner of different versions of the story as to what happened next. It may be that the Tiger remained on the high street. There's a very convincing story of that. My personal preferred version is that in progressing up the road back towards his unit, Wittmann came across the rear end of the rifle brigade, and they had managed to deploy a 6-pounder anti-tank gun, and as the Tiger came out of the smoke, they were able to shoot at it, probably just immobilize it, and so Wittmann thought, I can get back to this, fired everything around him, but bugged out and headed north away from the rest of his unit. He had lost radio communication with them, so they didn't know what was going on. And so at that point, Wittmann's part in the battle ends. There are some accounts that put him in the afternoon battle. Did not happen. He never claimed it. He did a radio interview that afternoon. He
did a radio interview that afternoon.
So I beg your pardon?
He did a radio interview the same day.
Yeah, he did indeed. Yes.
Like I just fought this epic tank battle, and now I'll go speak to my public. Wow.
Imagine how high on adrenaline he was, and stoked by the propaganda company that's come to interview him. There's some things in there that you can take, but the claim of the loss of a regiment, he's probably knocked out 12 tanks. 2 of them had 37mm guns. 1 of them didn't have a gun at all. He's stopped the advance. He's done a very intrepid, great thing. But you've got to remember that he took part in 2 actions in Normandy, at Villers Bocage and at Saint-Thau on the 8th of August. Both times he did what he probably shouldn't have done. He threw himself into an attack. This time he got very lucky. Everything went his way. The next time it didn't. And so you've got to measure his chutzpah with whether he should be doing what he's doing.
And we've been to that spot where Michael Wittmann bought the ranch.
So Dan, though, as you point out in the book, the battle continues after he's buggered off. So maybe we can talk a little bit about what's happening after.
Sure. The sharpshooters have taken a real big hit. They have a squadron of tanks that is split up, stuck on the top of a hill they can't get to, and who they can't get back without braving the Tigers. The brigade deploys a little bit around the town in order to see if they can find another way of getting to the cut-off troops. There's a group go south, try to get over the railway line. It's a bit of an embankment to get over, and when you're approaching enemy tanks, presenting the underside of your tank, that's not very comfortable. And so they decide that they're not going to do that. Meanwhile, the chaps up on the top of the hill are trying to get out. There's only 2 troops of tanks there. They may have what they've got 1, possibly 2 Fireflies, but the rest of them can't do a great deal against Tigers. They're receiving a little bit of artillery fire, but nothing particularly heavy. And the infantry contingent they got, there was an O group set to be on the hill just as the battle started. So you've got the colonel in charge of the sharpshooters, you've got the major in charge of the company of the rifle brigade, you've got a bunch of officers who are prepared to have an O group, and you've got their drivers. That's all the infantry they've got. So they're not able to do a great deal from where they are. They're not even able to do a decent reconnaissance of what's around them. So they're sort of hunkered down, hoping that something will change in their favour. The drama is that you're deep behind German lines. Little did they know that Panzer Laird to the north is trying to get some troops together, because Wittmann made his way back to their headquarters at Aubois, which is about 5 kilometres north of Villers. And you've got the first part of 2nd Panzer Division is starting to come up from the south. It's mainly the reconnaissance units, but they've been diverted from the American front where the Americans have broken through at Comont in order to take part in this. So again, we're diverting key troops away from where they want to be and are sending them into an unfortunate predicament for the British. During the course of the afternoon, the morning, things get slightly worse. The British are reinforced in the town with 1st 7th Queen, so they've got a battalion of infantry there. It's a little bit of a shambles. There are odd reports of Germans around the place. There's little parties of Panzer Grenadiers turning up, and so it's quite confused in the town. They can't get up to the hill, and so the chaps on top of the hill decide they're going to try and get out of there. They've tried heading north. They can't go south because that's where the Tiger tanks are. And so their last option is to head east towards Caen and try and find another way round. And just as they're heading off downhill, they get about a half a kilometre down the hill, and they run into another company of Tigers, the first company of of Wittmann's Schwer SS Panzer Abteilung 101. And they've got 8 to 10 Tigers with them, and they knock out a couple of the tanks. The rest of them scuttle back to the top of the hill, but the game is up, and they say they're going to burn their vehicles and get out as best they can. Almost all of them get captured. So we have now lost a company of infantry. We've lost a squadron of tanks, and we've lost the command and control centre of the sharpshooters. They're down to 2 squadrons, and one the brigadier has put one of the squadron commanders in charge of the remains. Now, most units you would think would think we've taken a drubbing, we've got to get out of here. But the sharpshooters, for some reason, were confident that they could hold the town. They've got a battalion of infantry with them, so they say we're going to stay here and see what happens. Meanwhile, on the supply route to there through Livry and back towards the American sector, the line's being cut. They're throwing troops in and tanks in order to keep the supply line open, but it's still a single road. So they're in a precarious spot, trying to hold on as best they can. And the Tigers into the afternoon are joined by a group of repaired Panzer IVs from Panzer Lehr, and there's other various bits of troops coming up from 2nd Panzer. And as the afternoon draws in, they start to be attacked. Now, the Tigers of the 1st Company, at least 8 of them hit the town. They split up into 2 groups, one going through the south, past the railway station and into the back streets, the other coming straight down the main street. Now, the chap who tried to get across the railway line earlier, Bill Cotton, he had taken his troop and they had planted themselves by the Mairie. That's Bill. After the battle, he has stolen a Luftwaffe flying
and awarded
jacket, an Italian flying jacket, but yeomanry are typically scavengers who like to dress up in things, and so it's very typical that they are not wearing regulation clothing. So Bill is a very well established character within the unit. He joined before the war as a territorial army soldier. He's fought through the Western Desert. He has been promoted in the field. He's now a lieutenant. He's in charge of a troop of his own, and he's arranged them around the town hall. His own tank is a 95mm close support tank, so it's designed for taking on infantry and buildings, and it's whilst you can use the gun against tanks, it's not really ideal. And so he puts his Firefly from the troop along one side of the square and arranges the 2 other Cromwells and an anti-tank gun from the Queen's regiment, from the Queen's battalion in the square to cover anything coming down the hill. Meanwhile, in the back streets behind them, there's 3 of the Tiger tanks try to push their way through. They run into chaps with Perch, our anti-tank weapon, handheld anti-tank weapon, and a 6-pounder, and 3 of them are knocked out. Coming down the high street, the first tank to reach the ambush that Bill Cotton has set is a Panzer IV, and that tries to dash past the spot, thinking that speed will take him through, and it does. All of the British tanks fire but miss this Panzer IV as it scuttles past. Now, one of the tank commanders, a chap called George Horn, has a rush of blood to the head. He advances behind the Panzer IV into the high street where there's other Tiger tanks up the road, and manages to engage this Panzer IV from the rear, knocking it out at the side of the road, zips past it and up a road opposite. The Germans are so surprised that anyone would have been stupid enough to do this that they don't do anything. George was a little unfortunate in that he was a bit over enthusiastic when having the gun fired, and his shoulder got in the way of the recoil, and it took out his collarbone, and so he had a little wound for it, but he did get a DSO for the privilege. So has taken a rather spectacular part in the battle. And now the tank commanders have realised that in order to engage the German tanks, their gun sights are useless because they're not designed to fire 10, 20 yards. They're designed to fire over battlefield distances, 800 to 1,000 yards. So what they do is they bore sight. And so you open up your breech, you look down the barrel of the gun, and you pick a prominent spot on the opposite side of the road. And as soon as that is covered, you fire. The second tank comes down, this one it is again trying to travel at speed, but it is hit by at least 2 of the tanks and cascades down the road past the Panzer IV, crashing into a building further on. That's Tiger 111, which I think you have a picture of, which is commanded by a chap called Hannes Philipson. That's rolled part. The ambush is where you see the advertising sign a little way behind that, that's where the ambush is set around the town hall, which is off the road to our right there. And he manages to escape, but 2 of his crew don't. Coming along behind that, there's another Tiger 113. Now he knows where the ambush is and has swung his gun out in order to try and engage whatever's there as it comes around the corner. But as he drives in front of whatever signage or whatever the tanks have been aimed at, he gets hit multiple times and is knocked out and stops up by the Panzer IV. So the road is now effectively blocked. These photographs are astonishing in that they were taken by Bill Cotton in the evening of the battle. So this is actually the day of the battle, and he's had the presence of mind to record what's happened, which is very much a unique thing. You very rarely come across day of action kill scores like that. Well, there's another Tiger that's meant to have been on the high street dithering around, not knowing what to do. And Bobby Bramall, who is the commander of the Firefly, he can see in the plate glass windows of the shops opposite that have survived about where the Tiger is. He's got the reflection. And so what he decides to do is shoot through the corner of the buildings in order to try and get a shot at him. Does this successfully, which forces the Tiger to withdraw. Now, all this time, Bill Cotton hasn't been in a tank. He's been directing the battle from the ground. It started to rain. He's got an umbrella up, very British, of
course.
And he has been peeking his head around the corner and telling the guys when something's happening. And after a little while, the Tiger up the road has fallen silent. And so I think, I wonder if it's been abandoned. This would be an easy kill if it is. And so he gets a couple of the infantry and a Piat, and they start to stalk up behind it. And just as they're getting close, the thing roars into life and starts manoeuvring around. And in turning around to get at them, there's a Piat fired at it from an upper window and manages to knock it out. So we've taken a situation where the British had a catastrophic loss in the morning. They lost in the region of 20 of their main battle tanks. At the front of the column, they've lost their regimental headquarters, and that's the morning, and that's the bit that everyone talks about. That's this miraculous attack that Wittmann has done. Everyone has completely ignored the fact that in the afternoon, between 6 and 8 Tiger tanks irreplaceably were knocked out. In addition, they lost probably 3 or 4 Panzer IVs during the course of various parts of the battle. The British in the afternoon lost 1 light tank in an entirely different part of the battlefield. It wasn't lost in the town. And so if you were to focus on a propaganda story, I think we've got honours even, if I'm brutally honest. I'm probably biased, but that's how it feels at this stage of the battle.
Chris, I've lost track of who has the next question.
Well, I was going to...
If you've got one, go for it.
Yeah, no, I mean, well, the one thing I think that we should talk about, because it's certainly a highlight of your book, is, like all the after the battle books, yours in particular, it is lavishly illustrated, staggeringly so. So how are all these photographs obtained? Why are there so many photographs of this battle? Because, again, as you go through your book, you can almost document minute by minute with photographs what's happening. How did we get so lucky, I guess?
I have been given the easiest task in the world in that I've got a battle I've got a problem with, and I start researching it, and I discover there's at least 3 rolls of film that have been taken by a German propaganda company, and I think I was the first to put them all in a relative order. I got it wrong in my first book, but in this one, I think it's perfected, and so you can trace the footsteps of the German propaganda photographer as he walks up the road, and we've identified who the 2 photographers were. And there's another one came along on the 17th of the first set were taken on the 14th, day after the battle. Another set on the 17th. There's newsreel footage shot of it, so we've got excerpts from that. And so that's the initial bit. You've got Bill Cotton exceptionally has taken 2 photographs during the actual battle itself, which are really helpful but unusual. Then there are there's 5 or 6 people who've been driving through the town, and there's a chap on the German side who has a camera. The Germans encouraged to carry cameras. For the British, it was a punishable offence to have a camera, but lots of our chaps seem to have them anyway. As a museum, we've got about 8,000 photographs taken during the war illegally, and so I'm very happy about that. But the Germans were encouraged to take photographs and have camera equipment, and so we've got various people who have taken photographs there. But I was particularly lucky because I have spoken to or read the first-hand accounts of about 30 people who took part in the battle. And that's out of probably 200 or so who were at the sharp end, which is a phenomenal, no, it's exceptional. I don't know any other battle where so much detail is available for a historian. The fact that I happen to pick it as my battle is very fortunate.
Yeah.
So, in the aftermath of the events on June 13th, the British retreat to a town that's 3 or 4 miles away, to a hilltop, where they set up a box defense and kind of hold that for a while, for a day, and then they eventually decide that they're going to pull that back, that this whole affair has not really worked out for them. And, what I want to know is there an alternate history timeline? I mean, you want to speculate a little bit. If the British, could they have pushed harder or fought more effectively, brought more troops in? Could they have held Villers Bocage? Might that have changed the Normandy campaign? Or is that just, the armchair natterings of so many generals after the fact?
It is fun to speculate on that, but I try not to criticize the chaps who are being shot at, because it's not a comfortable position to be in, and you're doing the best under trying circumstances. I think you could. Okay, let's put it this way: had they been successful, had the Tiger tanks not happened to be in the right spot at the right time, they would have taken the hill. 2nd Panzer Division is starting to turn up, and so they're going to be attacked from the south. They don't seem to have an awful lot of artillery support, so the British, with lots of American support, though. I mean, the second day of the battle came down to an American forward observer officer who put in an awful lot of strikes from the American lines. So there's a lot of support on the British side, but this is very early in the campaign. All of the units that I've been describing, I'm describing them as battalions and regiments and brigades as if they were full units. And the Germans weren't at full strength. They were waiting for more of the Tiger tanks to turn up. The British were... most of the units there were missing a component. The Rifle Brigade were missing their scout platoon, which is there should have been a reconnaissance going ahead of the advance, and all of the reconnaissance were doing so many different jobs that they couldn't cover the spot where Wittmann happened to be. So another little bit of misfortune there. The sharpshooters were down about 4 or 5 tanks from earlier fighting. And so you're not describing full units. They're reliant on the amount of supplies that are coming ashore. It's early days. And so they could probably have held out. They might even have been able to force a move from Panzer. But I don't think there was the strength ashore to push it. I mean, the other half of 7th Armored Division that hadn't gone on this raid, and 50th Infantry Division and an independent armoured brigade and other various troops were still trying to push through Tilly-sur-Seulles in order to get to Villers Bocage the other way, but were making no progress at all. So the Germans there were very strong, and had they been able to hold on, I think the position that they were holding at point 213 and the aspirations they had towards getting towards Caen were fairly unrealistic. They were just trying to keep the Germans out of balance, which is one of Montgomery's mantras, if you believe everything he says.
Well, Dan Taylor, thank you so much for joining us today on History Happy Hour and talking about Villers Bocage and talking particularly about your book, which is, as Dan said, it is absolutely jam-packed with photos. The book is Villers Bocage, Operation Perch, the complete account. And it is. We didn't really go into the second half of the battle much, but he does account for it in the book. And so if you're interested in this, definitely worth taking a look at. Dan, thank you so much for joining
Thank you so
me.
much, Dan. We
Thank you very much for
appreciate
having me.
Thank you.
Next week, we're back live.
We are indeed. Yes.
And we have no guest. It's going to be history
Like the old days.
talk. Yeah, it's going to be like the old days. So, hey, if there's something you're interested in asking about or talking to us about, send us an email, post it up on Facebook.
Give us something to talk about, please.
Reach out or just tune in and throw it into the comments section. And we'll bring a couple of topics with us. But meantime, maybe we can get the full report on Sophia at that point.
Or the full report on St. Louis.
Full report on St. Louis, which might be a lot shorter than the Sophia report. But yeah, that's a History Happy Talk next week. In the meantime, please subscribe to us on YouTube, follow us on Facebook, shout at us on X, listen to our podcast, listen to it. It's there. All those back shows are there on our podcast. Back us on Patreon.
Yes.
Browse historyhappyhour.com.
Yep. Thanks, everybody. Be safe.